Okay. So, glad to have you, Tejpreet.
Thank you.
Okay, who else is here?
Harinder. Hello.
Hi, Harinder. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you.
Good. Somebody help me with our, what do you call it? There's a Facebook page. Anyway. And they said, now, what picture do you want? You know, now they have a big, wide, horizontal picture on Facebook. And so I said, oh, I know exactly. And it was the one from our first Yogi Mela. So I saw everybody, and I saw you. It was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's always nice to fall back on that beautiful energy.
Oh, isn't it?
Yes. I'll be seeing you in February because I love that.
Oh, how wonderful. I'm so glad. I'm just going to tell the other people. Amandeep, this will be his third Yogi Mela, which means gathering of yogis. And he will be over President's Day weekend, which is about February 15 through 17 or something like that. He'll be teaching Rishi Dushdaman, the Aquarian warrior. Rishi Dushdaman was Guru Gobind Singh's life immediately preceding being the Guru. He was called Rishi Dushdaman, and he was a Himalayan yogi. And people make pilgrimage, actually, to go up to the top of that mountain and that little lake up there, snow-covered lake, where he spent, well, we'll find out how many years. It seems to me, Amandeep says it's thousands of years that he spent meditating there.
Wow.
So we're going to go there with him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll see you there.
Yes, looking forward.
So who else is here?
Suzanne.
Hi, Suzanne. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Good, thanks. And who else?
Rahmani and Tomas.
Oh, welcome. Glad to have you. Who else is here?
Siri Gian, I just looked on my interfaith calendar in February, and Friday is the 15th of February.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's
Friday
called Nirvana.
Friday is the 15th of February, and Monday is what, 18th?
Yeah.
Okay, 15 through 18. Thank you so much, dear.
Yeah. And the 15th is Nirvana Day in Buddhism.
No kidding.
Right.
Oh my God, what does that mean?
Well, come see our interfaith calendar. I just got it. And then on Sunday it starts the Brotherhood Sisterhood Week in the U.S. and Canada.
Oh, wow.
So, nice.
I'm writing that on my calendar, Nirvana Day. Wow.
Yeah.
And Friday night is free, everybody. Friday night is free.
Oh,
okay, so who else is here?
Can I tell you one more thing about that weekend?
Sure.
Friday is Vasanta Panchami, a North Indian celebration associated with Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and with Lakshmi, goddess of wealth.
Oh, my God. What day is that?
That's Friday, the 15th of February.
Oh, Lord. Okay, Lakshmi, I'm writing this down. Lakshmi and Saraswati, right?
Yeah. This is a calendar, multi-faith calendar that has Sikh, Shinto, Jewish, Hindu, Christian, Buddhist, Baha'i, Aboriginal spirituality, and Wiccan holidays throughout the 2016.
So is it online, or is it something about?
Yes, you can print it off online, or
can you give us the address?
Copy. Sure. It's published by the Multi-Faith Action Society, electronic version now available. Here it is, www.multifaithcalendar.org.
Multi-Faith calendar.org.
Yeah.
That sounds like a delightful thing.
It is.
Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so who else is here?
Carol.
Hi, Carol from Juneau. You doing well?
Very well, thanks.
Oh, good, thanks. Okay, who else?
David Kidden?
Say that again, please.
Can you hear me? David Kidden?
Speak up, please.
David Kidden? Can you hear me?
Oh, David Kidden. Oh,
yeah,
welcome,
that's me.
dear.
David
Kidden is calling from Sweden, right?
Yeah, yes,
oh,
that's right.
Good. I'm glad you could join us.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Uh-huh. And who else is here?
Sada Kaur.
Sada Kaur from Louisiana. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Oh, that makes me feel so good that you are feeling fine.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who else is here? Oh, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Speak up. Who else is here?
Good morning, Siri Gian. This is Nora.
Hi, Nora.
Hello.
Hi. Are you new to our group?
No, I've been around a while.
Oh, have you? Have you introduced yourself?
Yes.
Oh, I just have a bad memory.
No, you don't. I pop in and out every now and then.
Oh, okay. Well, we're glad to have you here.
Shushma Harimander is a friend here in Juneau.
Oh, good. We have a Juneau contingent.
Yeah.
Great. Is Harimander here? Let's ask that. Harimander, are you here? Maybe she'll listen to the recording. I bet she will. She takes the recordings and puts them on her iPad, which I think is a fabulous idea. And who else is here?
Ranjit.
Hi, Ranjit. Welcome.
Hi.
So let's just ask, is Guru Ravi here? Okay, we're really looking forward to her rejoining us. They're sisters, by the way. And Hargobin, your brother, is he here? Well, he'll listen to the recording. But we're glad you're here, Ranjit.
Oh, no, I had my mute on. I'm here.
Oh, he's here. Welcome, Hargobin.
Thank you. Yeah, Guru Ravi Kaur is getting close. She has a landline now, so I talked to her on that yesterday.
Oh, fabulous.
She's in her new house, so it's coming along. Lots of work,
Ravi, she moved, and, that takes a great deal of concentration to move. So
yeah, she had to move a house and a studio.
Huh?
She had to move the house and the studio. She was in that studio for 12 years, so she had lots of stuff in that studio.
So now she's starting her practice all over. God bless her. She's a wonderful Ayurvedic, how do you say, Ayurvedic healer.
Ayurvedic practitioner, or a healer. Yeah, she's really good at it. She's also a Jyotish, a Vedic astrologer. She's really good at that. Perfect.
Okay, so we're just going to give her website right now. It's called busydaygo.com, busydaygo.com. You might like to visit there. Wonderful things there. Now, who else is here? Okay. Well, we also have some shy ones that we are including. So God bless us all. So please sit straight. Oh, by the way, today is October the 17th, 2012. Please sit straight, palms together, eyes at the brow point. Feel this unity of mind and consciousness. Begin long, deep breathing. And sink into that unity of consciousness. Yogi Bhajan said that putting your palms together unifies the hemispheres of the brain. Sink into that beautiful consciousness. And be very aware of where our tuning in chant takes us, to the golden chain of teachers, to the infinite. Inhale. Guru. Namo. 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 Long deep breath. Feel that precious breath that powers your energy. Your blessed energy. And now begin heart breath. On the exhale, feel as though, well, he says the light, but feel as though the breath is coming out of your heart center. He says, but it is light. That is Baba Siri Chand. Good. Let your heart open. Let your heart heal. Let it heal everything in your whole life and with everybody that you know and care for and those you don't know and don't care for. Good. And now please send your beautiful heart breath to everyone, whether on this call or listening to this call. We've talked about it so many times. This is a precious, you might call it a unification or a ball of light. It is a precious joining. Oh, good. You have such ease in it now. Good. And now please send it to our presidential process for the good of all. And inhale. And exhale. Good, and being present. And now let's see who is here. Well, he says it's a kindness and the presence of the Jyotish. And, sir, what does that mean? Oh, first of all, is this Baba Siri Chand? He says, yes. He says, but of course, I brought all of my friends, all of my devotees. He says, we're all here. We are all here in a huge gathering. I can't imagine how many people are joining in this consciousness, joining in this knowledge. He says, because this knowledge is going out not only to you who are here in this class, he says, but it is going into the collective. It is going into the collective from the unknown. He says, to all who have ever been present, who have ever been in the grace of the Shiva, to all who have been present in the knowledge and the wonder and the wonder of transformation. He says that is the Shiva energy. He says, and you are graced to know it. He says, I don't have an ego, so I don't have to worry about that. He says, I'm simply stating the truth, the pure Satnam, the knowledge and the identity of the truth. He says, please put yourself in the flow of that transformation, whether it's slow transformation or whether it's quick transformation, whether it is by water flow, by air flow, by fire, which of course is Baba Siri Chand's element. He says in the element of many. He says many are in that. Whether it is in the air of simply being, or whether it is in the flow of the ethers, he says, which is my father's element, that is Guru Nanak, and that is incredible lightning speed awareness. He says, be in all of the elements. Be in all of the elements as you flow in this earth, time, and space. He says, he calls you all adepts. He says you are all adepts at living in this earth consciousness. And so I'm saying, sir, what do you mean by that? He says you all have flowed from many, many lifetimes. He says you have gained the courage, the knowledge, the intuition to be on both levels. He says, we call it both levels. To them, it's all the same. But the both levels of both the earth, kind consciousness, and what we would call the heavens, or the intuitive, or what we might sometimes call the unknown. From that consciousness, that amalgamation of both, that realization of both. He says the word both is just a simplicity. He says it's not quite right, but he says it's the best we can do right here, using this English language. And I'm saying, sir, is there another language that fits it better? He says, of course. He says, Gurmukhi and Sanskrit are very good. He says, there are others too. He said, but at this point we're using English because that's what we know. Okay, so sir, what would you like to tell us today? He says he would like you to sit back in ease, in kindness, in awareness. Do that right now. He says just feel yourself in the easy chair. Easy chair, understanding that as we go into this, what appears to be new consciousness to you, he said it is not to be hard. He says you can make it as hard as you want. He says you can just rack yourself up one side and the other. You can cut yourself with a sword. You can come up with all kinds of roadblocks and hurts and have all your past lifetime unhealed cells come up. You can even bring back the unhealed stuff. Even if you have gone through precious and deep healing, he says, you can bring back the unhealed stuff if you want. He says, it's up to you. It is totally up to you. He says, but if you would like to remain in this easy chair of consciousness, as we go through the changes, he says, you just consciously remain in that. So I'm saying, sir, how do we do that? He says, being consciously conscious of your consciousness. And that is a line that Yogi Bhajan used to tell us all the time. I used to puzzle over that a lot. Anyway, Baba Siri Chand is telling us to do that now. He says, when you are consciously conscious of your consciousness, it means that you are not jailed in by time and space, by your worries, by your ego thoughts and consciousness. He says you are not the jailer and the jailed. You have not thrown away the key. He says you have remedied that situation. He says you can see the jail, you can move into it. What he's calling is our everyday culture, our everyday consciousness. He says you can move in and out. He says the door is always open. He says the reason why you would move in there is because your whole culture lives in there. He says, but you, when you know yourself, with a capital S, when you know through your intuition, through your experience with the divine, when you know deeply, carefully, positively, with a huge heart, with a great valentine of love of the divine, as you move in and out on your automatic wheeled easy chair, he says you live in that, he says the duality will not kill you then. But it is up to you to take that choice, to take that program, to take that travel program. He says, sign up for it. Sign up for it. He says, so many people are so worried about the changeover. He says, when the changeover is to pure consciousness, he says, what's there to worry about for all of you who are on this great map, this great road of consciousness? If you are totally on this great road of consciousness, what you do is you shout hallelujah. Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God. That becomes a dominant culture. We are released from the jail because the culture no longer lives there. He says, sorrowfully, if people have not come to that evaluation, if they have not come to that experience, they will keep themselves locked in the jail. And that's when, as Yogi Bhajan, people said that people will go crazy and insane. He says, but it is your choice to be in it or out of it. It all arises from your intuition. It all arises from where your source is, the source of your information, the source of your consciousness, the source of knowing. He said it's just like switching that mode button, M-O-D-E button, on your electronic players. He says you can be stuck in the jail in this everyday consciousness, or you can move it over. You can move it over to be in this infinite consciousness that shines bright in the finite. He says it's a very simple process. And he says you have all been trained. You have all been trained. So that when things happen, so to speak, when things happen, then he says there's no room. There's no room for disappointment, hurt, anguish, and so on. However, all of that turns to absolute compassion for one another and for all of the people who are having the difficulty of not moving out. He says that becomes your pilgrimage. Your pilgrimage is to make available the consciousness, the energy, the very sweet knowing that all is taken care of if one listens, if one allows themselves to be moved by this consciousness, if one allows himself to stay present in the kindness and the access to this, what you would call the God space. He says, because in this new age, the culture becomes the God space and vice versa. The God space becomes the culture space. He says, do you understand that? He says, yes, the difficulty comes up in giving away, cleaning out your brain and your heart of all those antiques of sentimentality, of thinking this is the way it should be, because this is the way it has always been, because this is the way I have learned it, because this is the way I have learned a, quote, good person should be. That means, but if you stay in that place, that means staying in a place of very great, deep denial. Denial of the host of you, he calls it. So what's that? The host of you is your own God presence, having a gay old time living in this body and this mind. He says the host is your God consciousness. He says, don't deny it anymore. Forget about feeling worthy or non-worthy. He says that's really non sequitur. That it really has no bearing anymore. He says, please move yourself into that. He says, you can see that. He says, most of you are there at this moment. But he says, please focus and allow. Focus and allow yourself to be in that space. That space of the God consciousness that allows you to be here and present on this earth. And he says, for this particular meditation, it is so important for you to open your eyes. Open your eyes. And if you can look out a window, he says a window with a nice consciousness. He says, please do that. He says he wants you to be very present as the God self, being present in this everyday space. He says, after all, this is the God, the universal, that expresses itself as you on this great sojourn here on earth. This great journey here on earth through all the lifetimes. You may say, well, why did this beautiful God consciousness of love, equality, beyond gender, why did it give me all these trials and tribulations? If it is a God, why wouldn't it pick out only, quote, what I love, what I want, what makes me feel good? He says, because it is a process of transformation. He says it is a process of living out the duality of what you would call black and white and all the degrees in between. He says that is the desire of the God consciousness, to live through all that, to have gone through the great separation, going through all those lifetimes, picking up this general and very specific great knowledge through every lifetime, whether we are the creepy one or whether we are the one creeped upon, or whether we are the great perfection of innocence, of, how can I say, he says, lack of desire with intention which creates. He says that's who we are. The lack of desire with the intention that creates. He says, he calls that our handle, our identification of what we deem to be the small self, but is actually the pinpoint, the laser of the great God self of who we are. He says, put yourself in that place of knowledge, that pathway. Please do it right now. He says, remember, you have all dialed in here to understand that greatness that flows through you, that is absolutely non-judgmental. He says that is, in its essence, non-caring. Sir, what do you mean by non-caring? He says, aha, I gotcha. He says, you have learned in your everyday selves to be caring. And when I say non-caring, he says that freaks you out. He says, in general, in our culture, the word caring is often associated with an ego consciousness. If I am to be a good person, I need to be, quote, caring. He says, when you drop that conditioning, he says, please do it now. Drop that conditioning. Use your heart breath and drop that conditioning of being a caring person. That ego identity. Just drop it. Be an absolute pure neutrality of the God self. He says, and what happens? You move into absolute neutrality. You allow the God self to move through you. The God self that is a total you, that is a total space of serving. No ego, absolute serving. He says, do you see the difference? Do you feel the difference? He says, no longer are you a caring person, but you live in the God space, the consciousness, the presence. That is the experience of love. That is the experience of knowing. And the direction for serving in every infinitesimal aspect comes from this God space. You feel the flow. You feel the movement in your body. You feel the words coming in your brain. You know, you feel, you move with it. It is like moving on the river with the current, with the flow. He says you don't jump out and judge it. You do not jump out and judge it. You simply remain total in the flow of the divine, in the neutrality, to the point that you have given up the judgment of your, what we would call ego identity. You are no longer a caring person. You are simply beyond, you have amalgamated the duality, the separation between God and separate ego. You have amalgamated that. You totally allow the light, the consciousness, the knowledge, the action to move through you. And that movement is who you are as the consciously conscious of your consciousness being. That's it. That is it. He said it's beyond trusting it. It's beyond trusting that state of being. You simply are, with no question, with no hesitation. You are simply present. You are simply present as that flowing light, that experience of absolute, total neutrality, which moves you. There is no more sentimental love. Oh, I must love this person. I must love this event. I must accept this really difficult event that is happening for the other person. There's no more judgment about that. You are simply present to allow whatever it is to flow through you in the minute essence. When you do that, you experience. All of your senses are so much more alive, aware, and present on the larger scale. You are no longer in this jail. The demands of the culture are beyond you. You follow, you live in, you flow as the God essence. You have given up. You have given up judging. You have given up conditioning. You simply are that self. And if you ever do turn your mind to look at what's happening, you go, oh my God, I have the ability to care for, this ability to care for others, to serve all that is, whether it's my life, my family's life, the life of strangers, the life of people that I love and people that I think that I would be very upset at being in communion with. I'm simply here and present for all. Knowing that we all are the all in all. It is basically one hand serving the other hand. He says that's how those goddesses got all those hands, you know? You see them in pictures? They have all those arms and hands. He says all those hands serve all the other hands, which are all the manifestations we familiarize ourselves with separate manifestations. He says, but in fact, we are all the same God, the same goddess. We are simply present to serve all the manifestations as we are moved. It does not come from your frontal lobe. It comes from your whole being. Do you understand that? It comes from your whole being. It does not come from your emotional self, which may be repulsed or may be sentimental. It does not come from your conditioning. It is simply present. You are the presence. That's it. So simple, so grounded, so cozy, so expansive, so flowing. He says, do you understand that? Do you feel that? He says, please feel that now. Please be very aware now of the presence that is you and that is all, and you simply flow in it. When you flow in it, when you are in this condition, he says there becomes no separation. That does not mean that you become vulnerable, that you should become fearful in order to protect yourself. No. He says this consciousness protects what he calls the unit that is you. It protects the unit that is you. It takes over the job of the ego, which is to protect and project. It takes it over and does that job in exquisite ways that the finite ego cannot possibly comprehend. But as the finite ego, as it relaxes in that wheeled easy chair, then that is where all of the truth, the awareness, flows through that heretofore separate ego, that separate identity. That identity then becomes what the gurus would call the slave. But it is not, but being the slave of the master is not a difficult position. It is the most comfortable position, the most extraordinary position, because you just are. There are no worries. Can you imagine? There are no worries. It is beyond trust. It is beyond judgment. It is simply being in that cozy easy chair. That easy chair being the pure master. You are totally relaxed. Relaxed in that being and flowing. He says you could be totally in the midst of a battle led by Guru Gobind Singh. He says much killing, much difficulty. He says, but being in that cozy easy chair and allowing the knowing, the awareness, the presence to move through you, through every corpuscle, he calls it, every molecule, every bit of consciousness. He says that is the ease. Understand, that is the ease. He says you could be killed. The consequences are that the consciousness simply moves on to another body. He says it has a little respite first, but it moves on. So, completion is completion. He says when you live in that ease, there is no fear. There is no fear. So he says, please, diligent. Be diligent. Never take yourself out of that easy chair. Remember, it has its own mobility. It may be like flowing in a boat. He says, all is brought to you. He says, you follow the ease. He says, It's not just respond to the knowledge that comes through you, but all of your actions are sourced in that presence. That is you. That is the one that is one. And that is the experience that we all pine for on this yogic path. But do we have the diligence to be there? Do we have the practice to be there? Do we have the intention, the very present attention to be in that space consistently? He says, you want to be happy? He says, this is the key. This is the key that's in your pocket. He says, you can do this. No big problem. He says, just train yourself. Train yourself at every moment. Feel this experience now. This presence, this awareness. And know that it is you. He said it is moving your point of view. Moving your point of view. So simple. So simple. Be aware of the experience that happens when you move your point of view. He says, and now please make a note of that experience. Please note what happens when your point of view moves into this purely present neutrality. He says, very good. You're all very good. He says, now, he says again. I beg your pardon? Okay, so make a note. And now, he says, as part of our instructional motivation, he calls it, he says the instruction comes through each one to share with each one. He says, now, who will be the first to share? He says, extra points for the first person to share. Hello? Is anybody going to grab those extra points? He says, I am pushing you right now. Who will step forward?
Here again?
Yes, who is
Can you
it?
hear me?
Yes.
Suzanne.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi. I think it helps me understand when, and difficulty is a better way to understand, that if it's in God's hands, then being in the neutral self gives even more strength to those that are having the difficulty or you having the difficulty. It gives you a strength. It's not
interpreted as difficulty when you're in that space.
Yeah, there's a certain, because you're cared for, and in that knowing, I guess it's, I feel that it is that is the helping hand, that is the release, and allowing to see what the higher powers, the powers that be, what is the plan, which is beyond us. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a comfort. What I'm hearing y'all talk about it being a comfort.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah. And did you move into the experience of neutrality?
Yes. And then it's just nothing very, very calm. Calm is the word I feel. There
you go. That's your easy chair.
Oh, there you go. I like that.
That is it. That is it. I just want to tell everybody that Baba Siri Chand is continuing to teach through each one who opens up and shares, okay?
Thank you.
And so when you are in that calm, are you judging?
Are you asking me specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. No, but I do think there's an awareness that I think it's better if you're in the knowing that to stay neutral.
Say it again. In the awareness of what?
Knowing to stay neutral, not just assuming that you will. But for me, I'm very attentive to stay neutral. And that could be just lots of practice.
Right. That's what he called diligence.
Okay, yeah, that. And so when you're in it, and I have situations like you're in them, it's very comforting to rely on that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And things happen that you could never have thought of before, yes?
I think so. And I'm with everybody on the heart breath. That's a very powerful gift to trust in that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yes. Excellent. That's an incredible way to switch from the everyday consciousness to the, what should we call it, the great neutral consciousness. And in that consciousness, it's not like you are walking around in a dream. You are much more aware in that neutral space than you are in everyday consciousness. Isn't that the funniest thing?
Yeah, but I think it's empowering not just to yourself. Somehow I think it must go to other people. There's something that is strengthening, and because there's a strength there, it empowers other people. And that doesn't mean they know, but I think it's a comfort to other people as well.
You got it, girl. They catch the presence, don't they?
Okay, yeah, I think so.
And that certainly happens with heart breath. When somebody is having a hard time, or they're freaking out, or they're yelling at you, or try heart breath and see what happens.
Oh, that's amazing.
It is so powerful. It is so subtle. It's just amazing. Just watch what happens. Okay, thank you, dear. You got extra points.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you. Now, who else would like to share? Ranjit, would you like to? Ranjit?
Hi, Siri Gian. I'm here.
Hi.
That was funny. I was just saying, please don't call on me.
That's funny.
Because it's really funny because almost every time I have these incredible experiences, and today I don't know if it were my mind trying to catch it, and I wasn't relaxed enough to feel it in the very depths of my soul. But it was very it was tough for me to hear some of it.
What part?
I think the part of saying I wasn't a kind person. And I know that wasn't literal. That was, putting myself into the space of neutrality. And I think the part that really spoke to me was that even though I would be in the midst of a huge battle, to stay into that neutral part and to be completely relaxed in my easy chair. And, if my life were to be taken at that point, it didn't matter because that was just my form. And that my...
Hold on a minute. Ranjit, hold on a second. This is weird. Okay, now what I'm going to do, Ranjit, is to mute the whole class, and then you, as soon as I say that I've done that, then you press star 6, okay?
Okay.
Hold on. Okay, Ranjit, press star 6. Oh,
okay,
you're here. Okay, good.
So I was able to really relax in that. That was a big lesson to me right there. It took away a lot of my fear was taken away in that. I don't know why, but it just a lot of fear was lifted for me. But I don't know why I was so I don't know. I really found it a difficult concept to wrap around. And like I said, I don't know whether it was because I wasn't relaxed enough or what it was, but I found this to be one of the most difficult, for me, talks that I have ever listened to or participated in, listening to what he had to say. So I'm not sure. I guess I'm going to have to, unless he can tell me why now, I don't really know why it was so uncomfortable for me.
Okay, let's see what he has to say. He says, my dear, you are a beautiful, jolly person. He says, you are a beautiful pinnacle of the God that is, the God goddess that it is. He says, but, he says this concept of letting go any identity. He says, you're fully aware of the concept of non-attachment, right?
Yes.
He says, so the identity concept of being a caring person or a kind person, he says, will actually encapsulate you or enslave you, he says. He says, because you will be trying to figure out what is kind, caring, and compassionate from your thinking self, from your everyday self, from your conditioning, rather than moving from your God Goddess self, from your awareness, from your soul, from your neutrality. He says, for instance, he says the identity part, the small identity part, the cultural identity of being a kind and caring person, could lead you into a space where you are trying to, say, fix somebody, make somebody happy, trying to be kind to them, to change them. Whereas, if you were coming from soul, from that place of neutrality, you perhaps would see that you are respecting that person's transformational process. You would respect it, and you would consequently know exactly what to say, how to say it, how to move, your body language, how to bring the presence and the heart breath to the situation. Whereas with a smaller way, you may be actually retarding their transformational process. Does that make sense to you?
That makes a lot of sense. I think a question that came to me when you were saying this, and I think that's kind of what hit me earlier, listening to the talk, was it seems to be a fine line for me to distinguish between what is uncaring and letting the other person completely, go off on kind of on their own, or not let them feel that there's the support or the understanding, and accepting whatever happens in your life, to be open to accept absolutely everything. To then, does that leave us somewhere where we have no responsibility as a human, as everyone, as my brother or sister, to try to help anybody out and having their backs, or feeling like there's a support system there? Or I guess I'm confused between, do we just accept whatever anybody is doing at any given time, but keep ourselves separate to protect ourselves from injury, but be open? I don't know. I think that's where the lesson or the way of life, I think that's where I'm coming up against today. I don't know if I'm expressing it correctly, but I
You're
think
doing
that's
very well.
I think that's what I'm having difficulty with.
What he says, all of what you said, you drop it.
Okay.
You remember all the stuff that you mentioned?
Yes.
You drop it.
Okay.
And when you move, you very well know the dimension of soul. You know that, right?
Yes.
When you move into that space, everything that comes through you, you trust that everything is exactly the way you are doing, you are being, you are expressing. You're bringing food, you're being kind, you are allowing things to percolate from the divine level, not from your mind level. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So remember, all those things that you described are from the cultural conditioning level.
Mhm.
You drop it.
Okay.
That is pure non-attachment.
Mm-hmm.
When you drop it, it doesn't mean that it's all going to go to hell. You understand?
Yes.
But when you're in the soul dimension, all will be supported. It will all be husband, he calls it, like you, like a gardener. All will be husband in the most perfect way. And it doesn't mean that you drop people, you don't love people, It doesn't mean that. What does happen is that things happen in the most perfect way. Very gently, very subtly, very real, without being stopped by the judgment.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the fierceness comes in. The fierceness to be present in your soul space. It is a fierceness. And it is a flow. Okay. Does that make sense to you now?
It does, and it was a very tough one for me today. But I think it was I think that I haven't processed it all yet. But I do think it's going to be changing for me.
Okay, good. And
challenging, but changing.
He says you can listen to this recording a few more times.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And he says you are very well acquainted with the concept of non-attachment. He says this is what it's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an ugly thing. It's a very beautiful thing. But he says you're unattaching from the limited self to the totality. Okay?
Yes.
Good. Bless you, dear. Thank you.
Thank you. Bless you.
Okay, we have one more minute. Oh, by the way, I want to very much appreciate your speaking about that. Very much appreciate that, because it gave us a chance to talk that through, because, we're just trusting that soul needed that lesson to come out.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you,
Siri Gian?
Yes.
Tomas has something. Yeah, Tomas wishes to share.
Oh, yes, Tomas.
Hello, Siri Gian.
Hi, Tomas.
My muse told me to read this poem to you.
Oh, good.
It's for Baba Siri Chand represents for me what I call true teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And the name of this poem is Benign Design, Ignited Mind. Benign Design, Ignited Mind.
Mm-hmm.
Contact with true teachings moves us to see each being anew and sacrifice facts for direct access. Matter is gravitationally attracted light, and when we detect our actual radiance, then we have elected to remain awake. Being bright is the basis of our life, and stages aptly engage us in the happy discovery of our lustrous nature.
Wonderful. Wonderful, dear. I'm always amazed at how you have already have these poems all published and everything, just ready to help us flow through what Baba Siri Chand gives us. Thank you so much.
It amazes me, too.
Huh?
It amazes me, too.
Yeah, but that's what happens when you're in that flow, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
God bless you, dear. That's cool. Okay, so thanks to everybody, and for the joining of hearts, being in soul space together. giving up attachment, letting go attachment, being in your light. And now, stay on the phone as we do our closing song, because that's very important still to close the energy. Okay, so now, palms together, and really sing this beautiful song to each other and to yourselves. Inhale. May the long time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way on, guide your way on, guide your way on. Inhale. And bow to this beautiful infinity that is showing through the finite. Bless you all. One more thing. Yogi Bhajan said the whole spiritual path is about changing your identity. Changing your identity. And basically that's what we did today. God bless you all. Satnam, bless you. Talk to you next week.